There are moments in life when you find yourself standing in the middle of a crowded place, perhaps a busy supermarket aisle or a bustling city square, and suddenly the ground beneath you feels uncertain. You look around and see people moving with purpose, pushing carts, carrying briefcases, making plans, while you are struck by a quiet question that whispers in your chest, "Where am I really going?" That feeling, raw and unsettling, is what we usually call being lost. Our culture teaches us to fear this state. From childhood, we are told to have a plan, a direction, a clear vision of the future. We are praised when we know what we want and gently judged when we hesitate. Success, we are told, belongs to those who always know the map. But here is the hook. What if being lost is not a failure at all? What if feeling lost is the most honest place to begin? Think about it. Every great transformation starts with disorientation. The butterfly's cocoon is a place of dissolution before it becomes flight. The explorer who charts a new land must first step into territory where no map exists. The artist who discovers a new style first paints lines that feel uncertain, clumsy, unformed. To be lost is not the end of the road. It is the threshold of change. This idea can feel radical in places like New York, Toronto, London, or Berlin, where life moves quickly and productivity is worshipped. We carry calendars packed with meetings, expectations from family and society, and the quiet pressure of comparison. Everyone else seems to know their destination. Yet beneath the surface, many of us share the same secret. We do not feel as certain as we appear. Zen has always offered a different perspective. In Zen practice, the state of not knowing is not a weakness but a treasure. They call it beginner's mind. A mind free of rigid answers, open enough to see what is real. When we admit we are lost, we become teachable again. We begin to notice details we had ignored. We start to listen more deeply. The fog that unsettles us also softens us. You might recall moments in your own life when being lost eventually guided you somewhere important. Perhaps the job you thought you wanted collapsed, forcing you to discover a deeper passion. Perhaps a relationship ended, leaving you adrift until you learned how to stand in your own strength. Perhaps you moved to a new country feeling alien and confused, only to discover friendships and ways of being you could not have imagined. So let us not rush past this feeling of disorientation. Let us pause with it. Let us consider that maybe the most powerful journeys begin when the map is torn from our hands. Over the course of this exploration, we will uncover stories both ancient and modern that reveal the hidden strength in feeling lost. We will see how confusion can be a doorway, how uncertainty can soften into wisdom, and how the place where you feel most unsure may be the very place your life truly begins. We live in a world that prizes clarity. From early childhood, we are asked what we want to be when we grow up, as if certainty were the measure of worth. In school, we are told to plan our careers to prepare for futures that are expected to unfold neatly. In workplaces, we are encouraged to draft 5-year strategies to define our paths in quarterly objectives and annual reviews. In personal lives, we are asked to describe exactly what kind of partner we want, what kind of family we will create, where we will live. To admit we do not know feels like weakness. To confess uncertainty feels like failure. Yet the truth is that uncertainty is not only natural, it is necessary. The very moments that transform us most deeply are those when the old map no longer fits the landscape. A relationship ends, a career collapses, a health diagnosis changes the rhythm of our days. We are pushed into unfamiliar territory, and for a while we cannot see where we are going. It is tempting to panic, to force ourselves into premature certainty. But there is another way. We can choose to see uncertainty not as an enemy but as a strength. Uncertainty is fertile ground. In the forest, when a tree falls and leaves an open space, sunlight streams down and new growth appears. Without the gap, without the rupture, the saplings would never rise. In the same way, when life removes what we thought was secure, space opens for something new. But this only happens if we are willing to stand in the gap, if we can resist the urge to fill it instantly with false certainty. Consider the stories of great innovators. Many of them began in confusion. Steve Jobs once described how being fired from Apple, the very company he founded, was devastating and humiliating, but also the best thing that could have happened to him. The loss freed him to explore, to create again with the spirit of a beginner. He later said that it was in that lost period that he found the seeds of his greatest work. The uncertainty he faced was not an obstacle. It was the soil of transformation. Psychologists today speak of liminal space, the threshold between what was and what will be. It is uncomfortable because it is undefined. We feel stripped of identity, unmoored from routines. But liminal space is also sacred. It is the place where old identities dissolve and new ones emerge. To embrace uncertainty is to honor liminal space as a teacher. Zen has long understood this. In Zen practice, there is a phrase called not knowing mind. It does not mean ignorance. It means approaching life without the armor of fixed answers. It means being willing to say I do not know and to stand there without rushing. This openness allows reality to reveal itself directly without being distorted by assumptions. It is why the beginner often sees more clearly than the expert. The expert thinks he already knows while the beginner is paying attention. Imagine a student sitting down to learn calligraphy. Her strokes are awkward, her lines uneven. She feels embarrassed, but the teacher smiles. Good, he says. When you are clumsy, you are alive to the brush. You feel its weight, its resistance, its movement. When you become too confident, you will stop noticing. In this way, the clumsiness of the beginner is more alive than the polish of the expert. Uncertainty sharpens awareness. The same is true beyond the art studio. A young person uncertain of their career pays attention to what excites them, what drains them, what sparks curiosity. They are alert to possibility. Someone who has locked themselves too tightly into a rigid plan may ignore these signals, trudging down a path that no longer fits simply because they fear change. There is also a deep connection between uncertainty and resilience. When we cling to certainty, any disruption feels like disaster. But when we accept uncertainty as normal, disruptions lose their power to destroy us. The bamboo survives the storm because it bends. The oak that insists on standing rigid snaps. To embrace uncertainty is to cultivate flexibility, the ability to adapt without breaking. This flexibility is not passive. It is not giving up. It is the strength of water which yields yet carves valleys. A river does not know every turn of its journey, yet it finds its way to the sea. We too can flow, trusting that uncertainty will carry us forward if we stop thrashing against it. Consider a man who loses his job. If he clings to certainty, he may despair, convinced that his identity and worth have been destroyed. But if he can embrace uncertainty, he may begin to explore. He tries freelance work, volunteers, studies a new field. Months later, he may find himself in a role he never would have imagined, one that fits him better than the job he lost. The uncertainty was not a void, it was a bridge. In our culture of constant comparison, embracing uncertainty is also an antidote to shame. Social media shows us curated lives full of apparent clarity. Careers advancing, families, smiling homes, polished. When we feel lost, we believe we are the only ones. But beneath the surface, many of those polished images hide uncertainty too. To admit not knowing is an act of honesty. It cuts through the illusion. It reminds us that we are human, not machines. There is also beauty in the humility that uncertainty brings. When we are uncertain, we listen more. We ask questions. We seek guidance. This humility can deepen relationships and open unexpected doors. The person who admits they do not know invites collaboration. The person who insists they have all the answers isolates themselves. Even in science, uncertainty is not weakness but strength. Every breakthrough begins with the courage to say, "We do not yet understand." It was uncertainty that drove exploration of the cosmos, the mapping of the genome, the development of new medicines. If scientists feared not knowing, discovery would end. At the personal level, embracing uncertainty can change the way we experience time. When we are desperate for certainty, we rush. We want answers now, outcomes now, clarity now. But when we allow ourselves to dwell in uncertainty, we begin to slow down. We become attentive to what is here, not just what is next. In this way, uncertainty brings us back to presence. Consider someone who ends a long relationship. The uncertainty of what comes next can feel unbearable. But if they can sit in it, they may discover the quiet pleasures of solitude, the rediscovery of old passions, the chance to meet themselves anew. What felt like emptiness becomes fullness. What felt like failure becomes renewal. There is also a paradox here. When we stop demanding certainty, we often find clarity more easily. The student who relaxes about choosing a career becomes open to unexpected opportunities. The couple who stops forcing a decision about the future often discovers their connection naturally deepening. The employee who admits they do not know the answer often finds the solution more quickly because they are willing to learn. Letting go of the demand for certainty creates the space for genuine clarity to arise. To embrace uncertainty is also to accept impermanence. Nothing in life stays fixed. Careers evolve, relationships change, health shifts, cities transform. We suffer not because of change itself, but because we cling to the illusion of permanence. When we release that illusion, uncertainty feels less like a threat and more like the natural rhythm of life. There is an old Zen saying, "Great doubt, great awakening. Little doubt, little awakening. No doubt, no awakening." Doubt here does not mean cynical suspicion. It means the deep questioning that arises when old certainties fall away. It is this questioning that drives growth. To never feel lost is to never awaken. Think again of the cocoon. Inside, the caterpillar dissolves into a shapeless soup before reassembling as a butterfly. From the outside, it looks like destruction. From the inside, it feels like confusion. But without that dissolution, flight is impossible. The cocoon is uncertainty embodied, and yet, it is the very condition for transformation. Modern psychology echoes this. Developmental theorists speak of disequilibrium, the temporary state of confusion that occurs when our old ways of understanding are no longer adequate. Children experience it as they grow suddenly, realizing that their simple views of the world do not match reality. Adults experience it in crises when long-held beliefs collapse. But it is through disequilibrium that deeper, more complex understanding emerges. So how do we practice embracing uncertainty? It begins with reframing. Instead of saying "I am lost," try saying "I am exploring." Instead of saying "I do not know," try saying "I am learning." Language shapes perception. What feels like failure in one frame feels like possibility in another. Another practice is slowing down. When confusion arises, our instinct is to rush to grasp at the first answer, but often the best response is to pause, to breathe, to allow the uncertainty to ripen. Answers often come not when we force them, but when we give them space. We can also cultivate curiosity. When life feels uncertain, ask, "What might this be teaching me? What possibilities are opening that I cannot yet see?" Curiosity transforms fear into wonder. It shifts the mind from defense to discovery. And perhaps most importantly, we can cultivate trust. Trust that life has carried us through other uncertainties before. Trust that we have more resilience than we imagine. Trust that even when the map is unclear, the path is unfolding. This trust is not blind optimism. It is grounded in memory. Think of times you once felt lost. Did they not eventually lead somewhere meaningful? Did you not survive and often grow? To remember this is to strengthen our capacity to face the next uncertainty with steadier hearts. To embrace uncertainty is to embrace life itself, because life is not a fixed script. It is a living improvisation. The notes change, the rhythm shifts, the melody surprises us. If we demand certainty, we miss the music. If we relax into uncertainty, we begin to dance. Stories have always been the heartbeat of wisdom. A teaching spoken plainly often fades, but a teaching wrapped in a story lodges in memory and returns when life demands it. The Zen tradition has preserved hundreds of such tales, each a window into the art of letting go and the strength hidden in uncertainty. These parables were born in temples, mountain huts, and riverbanks, yet their echoes are alive today in city streets, crowded offices, and quiet apartments across the modern world. Let us step into some of these stories, ancient and contemporary, and listen for the lessons they still whisper. Story 1: The Empty Boat. A monk was crossing a river one morning, rowing slowly through the mist. He spotted another boat drifting toward him. He shouted a warning, but the boat did not change course. Irritated, he shouted again, louder. The boat collided with his own, rocking it sharply. Anger flared. He stood ready to scold the careless rower, but when he looked more closely, the boat was empty. The anger drained away as quickly as it had risen. There was no one to blame. The monk sat down in silence, struck by the absurdity of his outburst. From that day, he reminded himself most of what collides with me in life is just empty boats. The lesson is clear. So much of our suffering comes not from events themselves, but from the stories we attach to them. We are cut off in traffic and imagine the other driver as malicious. We receive a terse email and assume hostility. Yet often, like the empty boat, the act was impersonal, not aimed at us. If we can let go of the reflex to take everything personally, peace returns more quickly. Think of modern life. A worker in Toronto receives an abrupt message from his manager and spends hours stewing in resentment. Later, he discovers the manager was rushing between meetings, the tone unintended. An empty boat. In London, a commuter fumes when someone bumps her shoulder on the train until she notices the other passenger balancing a stroller and groceries. Again, an empty boat. To embrace uncertainty here means loosening the grip of interpretation, admitting we do not always know the full story. In that space, anger dissolves. Story 2: The Broken Cup. A Zen master once lifted a cup of tea before his students. He said, "I enjoy this cup. It holds my tea well. But for me, this cup is already broken." The students looked puzzled. The master smiled. "Because I know it will someday fall and shatter, I drink from it with full appreciation now. When it breaks, I will not grieve, for it was always destined to change." The wisdom is both simple and radical. Everything we love is fragile. To pretend otherwise is to set ourselves up for heartbreak. To accept impermanence is to free ourselves to cherish without clinging. In modern terms, imagine a woman in New York who treasures her grandmother's old vase. She lives in fear of dropping it. The anxiety overshadows the joy. If she could hold it as already broken, every glance would be gratitude, not dread. Or consider a father in Paris who watches his children grow. If he clings to the illusion that childhood will last forever, he will resist their growing independence. But if he holds their childhood as already passing, he can savor every bedtime story, every laugh, every hug, knowing its impermanence is what makes it precious. Uncertainty about the future need not be paralyzing. It can sharpen our presence. To live as if the cup is already broken is to drink each sip more fully. Story 3: The Lantern in the Wind. Long ago, a monk was charged with keeping the lanterns burning in a temple during a storm. Fierce winds howled. One by one, the lanterns went dark until only a single flame remained. The monk shielded it desperately with his robe, but at last the gusts blew it out. Defeated, he wept. The abbot found him there. "Why do you cry over the lantern?" the abbot asked. "Did you think the light belonged to this one flame? The wind has taken it, but fire itself has not died. When the storm passes, fire will return." We often mistake one form of light for light itself. A job, a relationship, a dream can vanish, and we imagine the essence is gone forever. Yet what gave them meaning still exists. Love can take new forms. Purpose can return in new vocations. Joy can reappear in unexpected places. Picture a man in Berlin who loses his lifelong job when his company closes. He feels extinguished, as if his flame has gone out. Months later, teaching part-time, he discovers a passion for guiding students. The lantern of his career is gone, but the fire of purpose is alive in another form. Or think of someone in Chicago whose marriage ends after 20 years. She believes love itself is over. Yet in time she feels companionship and warmth again in friendships, in community, perhaps even in new romance. The lantern died, but fire never left. The lesson is to trust the continuity of essence beneath changing forms. Letting go of one flame allows us to see the greater fire. Story 4: The Empty Chair. In a meditation hall, a master placed an empty chair at the center. Students asked why. He said, "This chair is for the person you cannot forgive. Each day, invite them to sit here. Bow to them. Release them." At first, the students resisted. "Why honor someone who hurt us?" The master replied, "Because as long as you clutch them in anger, you remain bound. Forgiveness is not for them. It is freedom for you." One student tried. Each morning he imagined his former friend who had betrayed him. At first he shook with rage. Over weeks the shaking turned to tears. One day he bowed and felt the weight lift. The betrayal remained real, but the chains loosened. He was no longer prisoner to his anger. Modern life brims with empty chairs. In workplaces, someone is passed over for promotion, and resents a colleague for years. In families, siblings carry grudges from childhood into old age. On social media, strangers are cast as enemies, replayed endlessly in our minds. Each time the empty chair waits. To let go is not to excuse harm. It is to stop rehearsing it. It is to walk lighter. Story 5. The Bag of Stones. Two travelers walked a long road. One carried a heavy bag. Curious, the other asked, "What do you carry?" "Stones," the traveler replied. "They remind me of where I have been." But the bag grew heavier each mile. Soon the traveler staggered under the weight. Reaching a river, he stumbled and sank. Only by letting go of the bag did he rise to the surface. We too carry bags of stones. Old regrets, grudges, identities that no longer fit. We convince ourselves these burdens define us, yet they exhaust and drown us. The strength we imagine in carrying them is false. The true strength is the courage to set them down. Picture a woman in London who replays an old mistake at work years after anyone else has forgotten. She drags it like a bag of stones, ashamed to move forward. The day she chooses to release it, her steps grow lighter. Or a man in Toronto clings to an identity as the family provider, even after retirement, carrying stones of pride and expectation. Only when he lets go does he discover joy in simply being present with grandchildren. Letting go is not erasing memory. It is dropping the unnecessary weight so we can keep walking. Bridging commentary. These stories, though ancient in origin, meet us squarely in modern struggles. The empty boat speaks to every email, misunderstood, every conflict fueled by assumption. The broken cup whispers to every parent watching a child grow, every lover fearing loss. The lantern in the wind comforts those who believe their light is gone forever. The empty chair challenges us to release chains of resentment. The bag of stones confronts us with the cost of carrying too much. Together they paint a picture of uncertainty, not as weakness but as an ally. To let go of false certainty is to discover deeper strength. Each story invites us to stop clutching at permanence and to begin walking more lightly through the changing landscape of our lives. Transition to modern examples, but parables alone are not enough. To fully embrace their wisdom, we need to see them alive in our own era, in the lives of people who could be our neighbors, colleagues, or even ourselves. These modern stories reveal that Zen wisdom is not locked in monasteries. It breathes in the choices of ordinary people facing extraordinary uncertainty. Story 6. The Young Professional in New York. Emma had always been the star. Top grades, prestigious university, first job in a glittering Manhattan firm. But after 2 years, she was exhausted. She lived by alarms, calendars, and endless to-do lists. Friends called her successful, but she felt hollow. One morning, riding the subway, she realized she could not remember the last time she laughed, sincerely. A mentor suggested she take a sabbatical. Terrified, she resisted. What would it mean to step off the track? Yet her body demanded rest. She finally agreed to 3 months away. At first she panicked in the empty days, but slowly she began to paint again, a hobby forgotten since childhood. She volunteered at a community garden. She discovered mornings that were not dictated by deadlines. When she returned, she did not go back to the firm. She started a small consultancy with flexible hours. Friends were shocked. They thought she had thrown away prestige. But Emma smiled. "I finally stopped carrying the bag of stones," she said. She had embraced uncertainty and found a life that fit. Her story mirrors the parables. The job was the lantern extinguished. The prestige was the broken cup. By letting them go, she discovered the greater fire of purpose and the joy of being present. Story 7. The Divorced Woman in Paris. Sophie married young. For 20 years she believed in the dream of stability. But when her marriage ended abruptly, she felt erased. At first, she could not bear the empty apartment. She carried her wedding album like a bag of stones, paging through it night after night, torturing herself with memories. One day, walking along the Seine, she noticed a group of street musicians. Their laughter startled her. For the first time in months, she stopped and listened. Something stirred. She began attending small concerts, then dance classes. She made new friends. Slowly, the album gathered dust on the shelf. Years later, she reflected, the marriage was a lantern in the wind. I thought love itself had died, but the fire returned in new forms. She had embraced uncertainty and found herself not diminished but expanded. Story 8. The startup founder in Berlin. Jonas poured everything into his tech startup. For 3 years he worked 18-hour days, believing certainty lay in success. Investors praised him, but one winter the company collapsed. Debt piled up. Friends avoided him. At first Jonas felt like the monk mourning the last lantern. His flame had died. But during the long months of unemployment he began hiking in the forests outside Berlin. He found peace in walking under trees without agenda. He started a blog about resilience. To his surprise, the blog grew into a community. Later he was invited to coach young entrepreneurs. The startup was the broken cup. It could not last. But from its shards something more enduring grew. Jonas discovered that the fire of purpose had never left. It had simply changed form. We have seen how the empty boat, the broken cup, the lantern, the empty chair, the bag of stones, and the stories of Emma, Sophie, and Jonas shine light on the power of uncertainty. But wisdom becomes deeper when we multiply perspectives. To see how universal this truth is, let us explore more tales, both imagined and real, each pointing to the same hidden strength in letting go. Story 9. The retired man in Canada. George had worked as an engineer in Montreal for 4 decades. Retirement looked bright in theory, yet when the day finally came, he felt stripped of identity. Mornings stretched silent and long. He clung to old notebooks of calculations as if they could prove he was still useful. One afternoon, his granddaughter asked him to walk her to school. He hesitated. What did he have to offer in that simple task? But he went. Along the way, she peppered him with questions about birds, bridges, clouds. For the first time in months, he felt alive. He realized that his worth was not in the notebooks, but in presence. George later said, "I thought I had lost my flame, but fire simply took a new form in the laughter of a child." Retirement had seemed like emptiness, but it was only a lantern blown out, making space for new light. Story 10. The student in London. Maya moved to London for university. Surrounded by ambitious classmates, she felt small. Social media made it worse. Everyone seemed polished, certain, already successful. She carried her insecurity like a bag of stones, convinced she was falling behind. One evening, she attended a lecture by an elderly Zen scholar. He told the story of the broken cup. Maya went home and stared at her own chipped mug, the only one she could afford. She realized her cup too was already broken, and that was precisely why each tea tasted precious. She began keeping a small journal of gratitude. A kind word from a classmate, a walk under rain, a page of poetry discovered by accident. Slowly the stones grew lighter. Maya's grades improved, but more importantly, her joy returned. The uncertainty of her future no longer terrified her. It became space to breathe. Story 11. The farmer and the wild horse. A classic Zen parable tells of a farmer whose horse ran away. Neighbors said, "How unlucky." The farmer simply replied, "Maybe." Days later, the horse returned, bringing wild companions. The neighbors exclaimed, "How fortunate." Again, he said, "Maybe." Later, his son broke his leg while taming a horse. "Unlucky," said the neighbors. "Maybe," the farmer replied. Soon after, war broke out and his son was spared from conscription because of the injury. "Lucky indeed," said the neighbors. Maybe, the farmer repeated. The story is simple yet profound. Certainty about fortune and misfortune is an illusion. What seems like disaster may conceal opportunity. What appears as success may carry hidden costs. The strength lies not in judging quickly, but in resting in uncertainty, trusting the unfolding. In modern terms, consider someone who loses a job in Boston and feels cursed only to find a new career that suits them better. Or a couple denied an apartment in Amsterdam who later find a smaller flat where they meet lifelong friends. Maybe is not resignation, it is openness. Story 12. The woman who left her marriage. Anna lived in a small town in northern Italy. She had been married for 15 years when she realized she had silenced her own voice for too long. Leaving felt impossible. People would judge. Her family would be disappointed. She imagined herself lost. But one evening she remembered the parable of the empty chair. She sat across from an imaginary version of herself. the younger woman who had once dreamed of painting. She bowed. She whispered, "I forgive you for forgetting me." Within months, she filed for separation. The first year was lonely. Yet in that loneliness, she picked up her brushes again. She painted rivers and skies. Local galleries noticed. Soon her art hung in cafes. Anna later said, "Uncertainty saved me. I stepped into emptiness and found myself again." Her story echoes the parable's forgiveness, letting go, and the courage to trust the unknown. Story 13. The Boy in the Carnival. At a summer carnival in Madrid, a young boy was separated from his parents. At first, he panicked, tears streaming down his face. But after a while, he began to notice the music, the colorful lights, the smell of sweet pastries. Strangers offered kind smiles. A gentle woman at the ticket booth helped reunite him with his family. Later, he told his mother, "Being lost was scary, but I saw more of the carnival than I ever would have holding your hand." This simple tale reveals the paradox: to be lost can open our eyes. Adults too can find that when we step off the familiar path, we notice beauty and kindness that routine had hidden. Uncertainty is not only fear, it can also be discovery. Story 14. The aging musician David was a cellist in Vienna. Arthritis slowly stiffened his fingers. The career he loved seemed broken. For months, he sank into despair. His identity had been music. Who was he without it? One evening, he watched young children in a park, tapping sticks on a bench, laughing at the noise they made. Something stirred. He began teaching neighborhood kids the basics of rhythm, then melody. His students adored him. He discovered that though his hands faltered, his passion could still flow through teaching. He reflected, "The cup was broken, but the tea still tasted sweet." Uncertainty about my future forced me to find a deeper way of giving. Story 15. The Scientist and the Stars. A scientist in California spent years studying a distant star system. One morning, new data erased her theory entirely. Her colleagues whispered that her career was ruined. At first, she grieved, clutching her equations like stones. Then she remembered the parable of the bamboo bending in storms. She let go and returned to the data with beginner's mind. Within a year, she discovered something entirely new, more groundbreaking than her original theory. Science thrives on uncertainty. Without the courage to admit not knowing, no discovery would be possible. Her story reminds us that doubt is not the end of knowledge, it is its engine. Bridging reflections from George in Montreal to Maya in London, from Anna in Italy to David in Vienna, the thread is the same. Each faced moments where certainty collapsed. Each could have clung to old forms, but instead they stepped into the unknown. What seemed like loss became renewal. The farmer's maybe reminds us not to rush to judgment. The boy in Madrid shows that even fear can open to wonder. The scientist reveals that doubt can be fuel. The musician proves that creativity outlives form. The divorced woman teaches that forgiveness begins with oneself. All these stories echo the old Zen parables. The empty boat warns us not to assume malice. The broken cup teaches impermanence. The lantern reveals continuity beneath change. The empty chair invites release. The bag of stones demands we drop our burdens. Together, ancient and modern stories form a tapestry. They tell us that uncertainty is not a gap to fear, but a bridge to walk. They remind us that letting go does not mean losing ourselves. It means discovering new forms of ourselves again and again. The call to the listener now turn inward. Ask yourself, what lantern are you mourning? What stones weigh your bag? What empty chair waits in your room? What broken cup still sits in your cupboard? The invitation is not to discard life's treasures, but to hold them lightly, to love them fully, knowing they are already changing, to see uncertainty not as punishment, but as possibility. The stories end, but their echoes do not. They linger in your choices. Tomorrow, when an email feels harsh, will you see an enemy or an empty boat? When something precious slips away, will you grieve only, or will you remember the fire that remains? When you feel lost in a crowd, will you despair, or will you look up at the carnival lights and discover wonder? This is the gift of story. It does not fix life. It prepares us to live it. With these 15 tales, both ancient and modern, we complete the gallery of illustrations. each one a mirror showing us the hidden strength in embracing uncertainty, each one an invitation to loosen the grip, to set down the stones, to open to what island. The stories we have walked through are not relics from distant temples. They are maps of the human condition, pointing to choices we face every day. The broken cup sits on our kitchen tables. The bag of stones rattles in our closets. The empty chair waits in our hearts. To honor these stories is not only to admire their poetry, but to apply their lessons to the way we live, work, love, and build community. Letting go in the mind. Our minds are restless engines. Neuroscience tells us that the human brain is wired for prediction. We seek patterns, we crave certainty. We generate endless scenarios of what might happen. This ability has kept us alive through millennia. But in a world of constant notifications, 24-hour news, and social media comparisons, the prediction machine runs too hot. We suffer not only from real threats, but from imagined futures. The parable of the empty boat reminds us how much of this suffering is self-made. The boat that bumps into us is often empty. The sharp email was typed in haste. The driver who cut us off never saw us. The friend who fell silent is busy, not hostile. If we can pause and admit that we do not know the full story, the brain's storm quiets. Cognitive therapy echoes this wisdom. Therapists teach clients to question automatic thoughts, to notice when the mind fills empty boats with villains. The practice is not to suppress thought, but to hold it lightly, as if watching clouds drift by. This shift from certainty to curiosity rewires the brain. Fear circuits calm, compassion circuits awaken. Uncertainty, once frightening, becomes freedom. Letting go in the body. The body too teaches the cost of clinging. Stress hormones surge when we fight what we cannot control. Muscles tighten, sleep shortens, immunity weakens. Doctors report an epidemic of burnout not only among executives, but teachers, nurses, parents, students. We push our bodies as if they were machines, shocked when they break. Yet the body knows the wisdom of the broken cup. Cells renew, muscles rest, bones mend. Impermanence is built into our physiology. Athletes recover not only through training, but through rest. Yogis speak of surrender in poses, not forcing but yielding to gravity. Even modern medicine embraces the idea of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reshape itself when old patterns dissolve. To let go in the body is to respect its rhythm, to accept that perfection is impossible, and that limits are not shameful but instructive. It means walking instead of sprinting when energy is low. It means savoring food instead of counting calories with fear. It means listening to fatigue as a teacher rather than fighting it as an enemy. When we release the grip of control, the body responds with resilience. The nervous system settles. Breath deepens. Health returns, not as flawless immortality, but as dynamic balance. The cup is always already broken, yet it still holds tea, and the tea still nourishes. Letting go in relationships nowhere is our clinging more obvious than in the ways we hold on to each other. We say we love, but often what we mean is we fear losing. Parents cling to children, projecting futures onto them. Partners cling to partners, demanding reassurance against abandonment. Friends cling to unspoken contracts of loyalty, resenting when they are broken. The parable of the empty chair speaks directly to this. We chain ourselves to past betrayals, rehearsing the same anger until it poisons us. To let go is not to excuse harm, but to free the self from carrying it. Forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves. Relationship research supports this. Psychologists at Stanford studied forgiveness interventions and found that those who practiced letting go of resentment had lower blood pressure, better sleep, and stronger immune systems. Love grows not through control, but through trust. Families flourish when parents allow children to become themselves. Partnerships deepen when each person releases the demand that the other fill every need. Friendships last when space is allowed for growth and change. Uncertainty in relationships is inevitable. We cannot predict who will stay, who will go, who will change. The strength lies not in pretending otherwise, but in embracing the mystery. To love is to risk, but it is also to live. Letting go in work and ambition. The modern workplace is perhaps the shrine of certainty. We draft business plans, quarterly goals, performance metrics. Productivity apps fill our phones. Yet life rarely obeys such neat charts. Markets collapse, technologies shift, pandemics rewrite the rules. The lantern in the wind speaks to this truth. The flame we protect so fiercely may vanish overnight, but fire itself is not gone. Purpose can take new forms. A failed project can spark a new idea. A lost job can open a different vocation. Ambition need not die, but it must be held lightly. Consider entrepreneurs who thrive after bankruptcy. They succeed not because they avoided uncertainty, but because they embraced it. They learned to pivot, to experiment, to listen to what reality revealed, instead of clinging to what they demanded. Creativity blossoms when perfection relaxes its grip. Innovation is the child of uncertainty. Even in personal careers, this flexibility matters. A teacher in Canada discovers joy in administration after injury ends classroom teaching. A journalist in New York finds fulfillment in podcasting when newspapers shrink. A scientist in Berlin shifts from lab work to science communication, reaching more people than experiments ever could. Each embraced uncertainty and found the fire alive in a new lantern. Letting go in time. Time itself is the great uncertainty. We know neither how long we have nor what the future holds. Yet we clutch at schedules as if they guaranteed permanence. We postpone joy, saying we will rest after this deadline, travel after this promotion, love fully after the children are grown. Life becomes a waiting room. The parable of the bag of stones is vivid here. We drag the past into the present, we lug future fears into today until our backs bend. What if we set the bag down? What if we lived this morning as enough? Mindfulness practice offers this entry. To breathe with awareness is to drop the bag, if only for a moment. To savor a sip of coffee, to hear a bird outside the window, to feel the warmth of another hand. These are not luxuries. They are life itself. And they are only available now. When we release the demand to know how the story ends, we discover the beauty of the chapter we are in. Uncertainty about the future stops being a threat. It becomes permission to live fully in the present. Letting go in society. The parables also speak beyond individuals. Societies themselves cling to certainty. Nations cling to borders, identities, ideologies. Communities fracture over politics, religions, traditions. Each side insists on being the oak, refusing to bend, and so storms break them. The bamboo offers another way. Flexibility does not mean surrendering values. It means adapting with grace. It means listening, compromising, evolving. History shows that the societies that thrive are those that release rigidity. Democracies endure because they allow peaceful transfer of power, admitting uncertainty about who will lead. Scientific cultures flourish because they question old assumptions, letting go of dogma. Communities heal when they forgive historical wounds, allowing space for new stories. Our own age is marked by polarization, by fear of difference, by clinging to certainty. Yet perhaps the old parables can guide us. Imagine if citizens approached politics with maybe instead of absolute judgment. Imagine if leaders admitted not knowing and invited collaboration. Imagine if communities bowed to the empty chair of past harm and chose to release. Uncertainty embraced collectively could be the seed of peace. Practical ways to practice letting go. Stories inspire, but practice makes them real. How do we embrace uncertainty in daily life? Not by grand gestures, but by simple habits repeated. Breathing. Before sending a heated email, pause for 3 breaths. This creates space between reaction and choice. The empty boat passes without collision. Pausing, set aside 5 minutes each day with no agenda. Sit, walk, or simply gaze at the sky. This allows the nervous system to reset, reminding the body that it is safe even in uncertainty. Gratitude. Each evening write one thing you are thankful for. This shifts focus from scarcity to abundance, from clinging to what is missing to noticing what is present. Reflection. When you catch yourself holding tightly, ask, what am I afraid of losing? Often the answer reveals fear more than necessity. Awareness loosens the grip. Community. Share your uncertainties with trusted friends. Vulnerability builds connection. When others admit their own doubts, you realize you are not alone. Forgiveness. Place an empty chair in your imagination. Invite someone you cannot forgive. Bow to them. This ritual shifts energy, freeing you from chains of resentment. The gift of letting go. What do we gain by embracing uncertainty? Not a life free of pain, but a life free of unnecessary suffering. Storms still come, but we bend. Lanterns still blow out, but fire returns. Cups still break, but tea still nourishes. Stones still exist, but we no longer carry them. We gain lightness, the ability to walk without the crushing weight of control. We gain presence, the ability to live this moment without demanding another. We gain compassion, the ability to see others not as threats, but as fellow travelers carrying their own bags. Most of all, we gain freedom. Not the shallow freedom of doing whatever we please, but the deeper freedom of being at peace even when we cannot please ourselves. The freedom of discovering that we are enough, even without certainty. The journey we have taken together has been long, winding, and full of stories. We began by naming a truth many hesitate to admit, that we feel lost. We explored the strength hidden in uncertainty. We listened to parables of monks, farmers, broken cups, empty chairs, drifting boats. We watched ordinary people in New York, Paris, Berlin, Montreal, London, and Vienna discover resilience in moments when life dismantled their certainties. And we wove these stories into practical insights for the way we live, love, work, and build community today. Now we arrive at the end, though. In another sense, this is the beginning. The conclusion of a teaching is not the sealing of a box. It is the opening of a door, gathering the threads. What have we learned? That anger often dissolves when we realize the boat is empty. That impermanence frees us to savor the tea while the cup still holds. That flames die, but fire survives. That forgiveness is a release not for others, but for ourselves. That the stones we drag need not define us. We have seen how uncertainty is not merely something to tolerate, but something to trust. The monk in the mist, the farmer watching his horse, the young professional quitting her firm, the divorced woman rediscovering herself, the scientist revising her theory, the retired grandfather walking his granddaughter to school all teach the same lesson. The ground shifts, the map disappears, and what feels like emptiness becomes a path. The stories show us that letting go is not weakness, but courage. It takes strength to set down stones. It takes bravery to release a flame. It takes humility to admit not knowing. And yet it is in these acts that our deepest freedom lies. Living the lessons, but reflection alone is not enough. The value of these teachings is proven in practice. Life will give you opportunities, perhaps sooner than you wish to embody them. The next time someone cuts you off in traffic or sends a harsh message, remember the empty boat. The next time you feel overwhelmed by the thought of losing something or someone dear, remember the broken cup. The next time a cherished project ends, remember the lantern in the wind. The next time you cannot forgive, imagine the empty chair. The next time you feel crushed under regret or fear, feel the bag of stones and choose to drop it. These are not abstract metaphors. They are practical instructions for living with more grace. They are reminders to hold lightly, to walk lightly, to be present without demanding permanence. Facing the fear of letting go. Of course, fear will resist. The mind whispers, if I let go, I will fall apart. If I loosen my grip, I will lose everything. But what if the opposite is true? What if the only way to fall apart is to cling too tightly? What if the only way to lose everything is to treat everything as permanent? The paradox is that letting go gives back. Release anger, and peace returns. Release control, and creativity flows. Release resentment, and love renews. Release the past, and the present becomes livable. The stories we have heard are proof. The man who lost his job found new purpose. The woman who left her marriage found her voice. The scientist whose theory collapsed found discovery. The child who got lost in the carnival found wonder. The old monk whose robe was stained found humility. Each feared letting go, and each found that letting go carried them, not destroyed them. The lightness of being. There is a lightness in those who live this way. You can see it in their walk, hear it in their laughter. They do not cling to grudges, they do not live by rigid plans, they do not grasp for permanence. They know the boat is empty, the cup is already broken, the lantern is fragile, the bag can be set down. They carry themselves not with indifference but with openness. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack all day and then finally removing it. The relief, the breath, the sudden energy. That is what letting go feels like in the soul. You may not realize how much weight you are carrying until you release it. This lightness does not mean carelessness. It means caring freely. It means loving without chains, working without obsession, living without fear of impermanence. It means being fully present, knowing everything changes, and that is what makes everything precious. The power of community. These teachings are not only personal, they ripple outward. When a person lets go of resentment, families heal. When leaders let go of ego, organizations thrive. When communities let go of rigid identities, societies move toward peace. We are living in an age of division, fear, and clinging. Nations cling to old stories. Groups cling to purity. Individuals cling to grievances. What if we remembered the bamboo instead of the oak? What if we bent, listened, forgave, adapted? The survival of our shared world may depend on our collective ability to embrace uncertainty together. Every story in this journey has been about individuals, but each one also points to the possibility of a different kind of society. A society not built on fear of change, but on openness to it. Not on clinging to control, but on trust in resilience. Returning to the beginning, we began with a question: what if being lost is not a failure, but the most honest place to start? By now the answer is clear. To be lost is to be alive in the mystery. To be uncertain is to be open to discovery. To let go is to return to the rhythm of life itself. The cocoon dissolves before the butterfly emerges. The seed cracks before the tree rises. The night deepens before the dawn. Loss and uncertainty are not detours. They are the path itself. So if you feel lost tonight, know that you are not behind. You are not broken. You are exactly where your path begins. A call to you: take a breath now. Bring to mind one weight you have been carrying. A fear, a regret, a resentment, a demand for certainty. Hold it gently in awareness. Imagine setting it down beside you just for a moment. Feel the space that opens. Notice the lightness that follows. That space is where peace begins. As you walk forward, remember the stories. Remember the monk in the mist, the farmer with his horse, the child in the carnival, the scientist under the stars. Remember Emma, Sophie, Jonas, George, Maya, Anna, David. They are not distant figures. They are companions walking the same road. And remember yourself. You too are a story still unfolding. You too can be a parable for someone else, showing them that uncertainty is not the end but the beginning. So share your story. Share the moments when you felt lost and what you discovered there. Speak it to your family, your friends, your community. Or write it in a journal, or whisper it in prayer, or comment below this video. Each time you share, you turn loneliness into connection. You remind others that they are not alone in their uncertainty. This is the call. Do not run from uncertainty. Do not fear being lost. Walk into it with open hands, open eyes, open heart. Let go of the stones. Drink from the broken cup. Trust that fire still burns. Bow to the empty chair. Step lightly into the unknown. Because in truth, the unknown is not empty. It is full of life, waiting to be lived.